Russia's meddling in the recent U.S. presidential election, by hacking Democratic Party emails, is already a huge scandal. And if President Trump or his top campaign aides were somehow complicit in that meddling, or compromised by the Kremlin, the scandal meter jumps to Watergate-scale levels. President Trump or his top campaign aides were somehow complicit in that meddling, or compromised by the Kremlin, the scandal meter jumps to Watergate-scale levels. Multiple investigations are starting to dig into those questions. For now, though, let's take Trump's bewildering reluctance to criticize Russian President Vladimir Putin at its most benign, face-value interpretation, that he simply wants to reduce tensions between two nuclear-armed powers. Vladimir Putin at its most benign, face-value interpretation, that he simply wants to reduce tensions between two nuclear-armed powers. It would be great if we could get along with Russia, Trump said at his rambling news conference on Thursday, adding that the false reporting by the media makes it much harder to make a deal with Russia. And what would such a deal look like? Trump has suggested that he'd like the United States and Russia to team up to defeat the Islamic State of Iraq and Syria, or ISIS. Islamic State of Iraq and Syria, or ISIS. That would be a good deal, right? Actually, not really, particularly if Putin's conditions included the relaxation of sanctions imposed for Russian aggression in Ukraine and interference in U.S. politics. Putin has shown himself to be an autocratic thug determined to expand Russian influence and undermine the West. Easing sanctions would threaten Ukrainian independence, agitate NATO allies fearful of Russian hegemony, and leave empty rhetoric as the only penalty for trying to subvert American democracy. Work with Putin on Islamic State, opposing view. Any alliance with Russia to fight ISIS would be a Faustian arrangement where the U.S. would be drawn into an association with Russia's murderous partner, Syrian President Bashar Assad, whose regime hanged up to 13,000 people in a military prison over the past 6 years, according to a recent findings by Amnesty International. Nor would a deal with Russia do anything to curb Iranian aggression in the Middle East, something for which the Trump administration put Iran on notice earlier this month. Russia has no incentive to minimize Iranian influence. It relies on Iranian-sponsored proxies such as Hezbollah for ground troops in Syria. In any event, Russia and Iran share a border and billions of dollars in energy, construction and trade deals. Trump appears convinced that Russian assistance would speed up the defeat of ISIS, which he has described as his top foreign policy priority. Crushing the terrorist organization is vital. But the reality on the ground suggests that a U.S.-Russian military alliance would be a strategic blunder. Putin entered the Syrian civil war in 2015 as the Assad regime was ready to collapse, threatening to take with it Russia's base of influence in the Middle East. Putin maintains a Mediterranean naval station on the Syrian coast, and his goal has always been less to defeat ISIS than to keep Assad in power. Russian air support in Syria flew 85% to 90% of attack missions against moderate rebels supported by America, resorting to carpet bombing that devastated civilian populations. It was a Syrian or Russian airstrike that generated the heartbreaking photo of a bloodied, 5-year-old boy waiting for care in an ambulance in Aleppo last August. Trump's ex-national security advisor Michael Flynn, forced to resign this week after lying about discussions with the Russians, was a strong advocate within Trump's inner circle for closer ties with Putin, urging the sharing of intelligence and operations to fight terrorism. But the U.S. military and intelligence communities have balked at sharing classified information, suspecting that the Russians would use it to attack U.S.-backed rebel forces. The only military gains ISIS has made in recent months have been against Russian-backed Syrian forces in the city of Palmyra. Everywhere else, the terror group is losing ground to U.S.-supported Kurdish and Syrian rebel forces. Despite Trump disparaging current efforts to defeat ISIS, the supposed caliphate established in 2014 is starting to crumble, losing well over half its territory in Iraq and more than a quarter of it in Syria. The commander of the U.S.-led coalition in Iraq, Lieutenant General Sean McFarland, estimated last August that 45,000 ISIS fighters had been taken off the battlefield. With ISIS slowly being driven out of the large Iraqi city of Mosul, its last major stronghold is its de facto capital of Raqqa in north-central Syria. Syrian democratic forces assisted by the untied states have begun a drive to liberate Raqqa, and it's unclear how useful Russian air support operating in the western part of the country might be. Putin is already testing Trump by deploying cruise missiles in an apparent violation of an arms control treaty, running a spy ship close to the east coast, and allowing his fighter aircraft to buzz a U.S. warship. Trump described these actions on Thursday as not good. The same words can be applied to the idea of a deal between America and Russia. USA Today's editorial opinions are decided by its editorial board, separate from the news staff. Most editorials are coupled with an opposing view, a unique USA Today feature.